So I've been using VSCode for a few weeks, and I wanted to make a video comparing, really the approach of. Well, let's get to VSCode. This is VSCode here. The approach of VSCode to the way that we do things, or the way that I do things, at least in Vim. I'll warn you ahead of time that this is going to be messy because I'm really sloppy with VSCode because I've only been using it for a few weeks, and at the same time I'm sloppy with Vim because I've been using something else for a few weeks. So trying to use both of them at the same time is going to be a little bit of a challenge, but let's take a look. Now, this is VSCode. Is going to be nice here in Solarized. So in addition to other obvious changes, when you see Solarized, we're in VSCode, and then Vim is in, let's see, what is this? This is one of the built-in Vim color schemes. This is Habomax. So when you see Habomax, and we're in Vim. We'll go over editing first. Vim has modal editing. I'm not going to do a big demonstration and explanation of everything, but let's just suffice it to say it's very easy to move around. If you see a place on the screen you want to get, you've got a few different ways of getting there within a handful of keystrokes. Some of what I'm doing just with moving around here is by using the search. Search is very quick and easy in Vim, and I think I'm going to get to a comparison of searching here by the end of the video. But for right now, just editing. Also, with modal editing, if you select a block of text, then you can do a lot more with that selection. I could go inside of this selection, for instance, and do a search and replace, or some other operation that's a little more complex than the sort of one key you usually get in an interface like VSCode. Like VSCode, you can select something, you can copy, paste, delete. Is that it? Right. So you've got a few other things. The modal editing is very powerful. So Vim definitely takes this one, but maybe not by as much as you think, because VS Code does have an extension that allows modal editing. I tried it without that because I feel like I only have a certain amount of bandwidth to dedicate to my editor while I'm using it. And if I take my habits from an old editor to a new editor, then most of that bandwidth is taken up, and also I feel so comfortable that I don't have the impetus to look at and explore the other features. Pretty much what you get in VS Code. You move around with the arrow keys. If you want to move around through words, you can hit Control and arrow key, and then backspace arrow key, function arrow key, Control home and Control end. Go to the beginning and end of a file. You do have you can go to a line number. That's not too bad. You can even go to a line and a column number if you knew what column you wanted to go to. You can move a single line or a block of code up and down. You can delete a line. It's got two good tricks. So you got multi-cursors. Here's a simple. Well, let's find a word that is more common. So if I just go here, then I can start selecting all instances of the word return in this file, and I can do something fancy with it, and see what's happening while I do it. So if this were more than a word replacement, then I could maybe move around through commas and spaces, and you're limited by the fact that you still don't have all those nice keyboard commands while you're operating your multi-cursor. You still have arrow keys and delete and backspace and page up and page down. So it's not as powerful as Vim macros, but it's neat. You can undo it all with one undo. See? So it's one undo, does each operation. However, Windows cuts that up per. You still have the multi-cursors on. See, I'm even moving around the file with them. So sometimes when you have a list or you have some strings, and you say you want to put a quote at the beginning of one and the end of another, then it's going to be a lot faster than trying to do a search and replace. Most of the multi-cursor stuff that you would do in VS Code and Vim, you would use a macro or a search and replace. You've got expand selection, so I can, let's see, here's word, here's line with the tab in front of it, block with the tab in front of it, function with the tab in front of it. You can move these things. I can move this function around and select it pretty easily. I don't describe all of that to say that it's better than Vim, but it's definitely enough to work with. I do a lot of things besides programming, and so I work with this interface in a lot of different programs. If you're working in Word, then these are the tools you have. It's a little more than the tools you have, and in Word, it's perfectly usable. If there were no modal editing plugin for this, then you could get used to it, and I don't think it would slow you down that much. It's not so often that you have text editing where you really need to crush it. But Vim is without a question better. I think the gap would be, as far as moving around and editing your file, the gap would be narrow if you installed the plugin. It's not going to be as nice. I've heard reports that there are things missing, but it's getting better every day. One example here, a big knock against this expanding selection in VS Code is that it didn't know what quotes were. It still doesn't know what triple quotes are, but it does know what single quotes are. So if I move over here, you see I can do an expanding selection, and it's going to, no, it still doesn't know what quotes are. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But these are the tools you have, and it's everything that you could want, or everything that you could need to edit files. So let's just go to searching for a minute. If you want to do a search, it's something in VS Code you'd be really familiar with. It's Control F. You want to do replace, you put Control H. So if I want to return, if I want to replace occurrences of the word return with, let's do something that we're really going to see with just AAA, and I can do that. As I hit enter, they go one at a time. I can sort of switch back to just search by hitting Control F again. Skip a few, then Control H. You've got these buttons here. That also brings you back to Control F. You go back to Control H, and you're replacing them again. And I'll just, one thing I keep tripping over is that you frequently use the escape key in VS Code, but Control open square bracket is not the escape key in VS Code. So I keep hitting that, expecting it to escape, and it does not. In Vim, searches, let's see, it looks like we made some changes on here. Let's undo those. All right. In Vim, search is instantaneous, almost. You hit / and you put in whatever you're searching for. If you want to replace, then you type in this command here. This will replace everything in the file. Or let's do this. We'll replace every version of return with replace. And we can put this C here, and it'll ask me for each one. Yes, no, yes. So a little smoother than doing it in VS Code. All right. Global search. VS Code global search is here. It's like I've searched for whatever was under the cursor, but if I put in the word return, you going to get quite a list, right? So here they all are. We can, oops. If I hit enter, how can I move through? So I can move through this list with the mouse. Okay. And with the keyboard. All right. I warned you. So here I can open a few files. All right. I'm not sure what I'm asking for it to do, but we'll just try that again. You can also do search and replace for your whole, for a whole file. I have not filtered out files in my virtual environment. I'm not going to replace everything because I'll end up replacing things in my virtual environment that are not backed up in Git, and so then I'll just have a mess that I need to clean up. But here it's possible to do it. In Vim, global search just looks like grep. So if I grep for return, then the first thing it brings up, that's the first file that it found return in. I've got to open up this window to see all of them. I can open that up nice and big, within this window I can search. So I've got a lot of my movement and other commands here. And so I can use cursor. I think I can probably even use mouse too. Yes, so you can even use the mouse and scroll up and down if you want to have a look at that. There we go. Double click opens a file. Not bad. All right. Search and replace. In Vim, you can search and replace through all of your open buffers. You can search and replace through all of your open arg list. There may be other ways, but I have a plug-in here that finds, here I found every instance of return, and I can search and replace them here. Right, so I still have all the tools. I could, for instance, if I wanted to search and replace every return in my project, then I would, I'll replace return with regret, and we'll do all of them. And then if I save this, it will change all of those files at once, which I don't want to do because, again, I just trash my virtual environment if I did that. But there we go. Search and replace in Vim. I think I'll give this one to Vim. It's grep is probably a little handier and more capable than the regex history or the regex use in VS Code. It does have regex. It does have case sensitive. I like the fact that I can open a window and still use a lot of my commands. That I can sort of search through the search results if there's a string or something that I want. I think Vim's got a little more power in that respect. Let's see. Let's look at opening a file. Now, this is something that I think is really neat in VS Code. If I go into this window and I single click a file that's not open, then it opens it. Well, let's find something that's not open. So it opens this as a preview. I can scroll up and down in it, have a look at it. If I click another file, see, I didn't get a new tab because that wasn't open. If I make a change, then now it's going to be persistent and that file will be open in a tab, which is a way to control how many tabs you have. There's also a fuzzy search, so I can fuzzy search. These are all my recently opened files, so it gives me that list first. I can mouse and arrow through here, and then if I begin to search for something, then it's going to give me the fuzzy search, and it's going to dig all the way through my test folders. It will, though there's nothing here in my, but if I go here, then I might find something, that's down in my disk folder or down in my virtual environment, and search through all those. And you can set it up to not allow search through there, but that is file opening in VS Code. File opening in Vim, and I'm going to get in trouble with the Vim people because I don't have the FCF plugin installed. There are plugins you can use in Vim to make it more like VS Code. One is FCF, and if you open it up, you get a window with a nice fuzzy finder. You do get a preview, but you can't move up and down in the preview. You can look at it, right? And maybe there is something out there even where you can do that. You have file browsers that you can open up. Let's see. Yeah. So I've got a file browser here. So if I want to open it up, I don't. You can tell I don't use that very often, but there you go. There is a file browser. There is a thing that does that. Really, if I get where I need a file browser, then this is very non-Vimish. I just open up, I just open up Explorer here, the Windows Explorer, and go through the folders that way. Dig around, find whatever I need, and you can open something. Let's see. Oh, that's a folder. Okay. So I can pick one of my Vim instances and open up the file right inside of there. What I usually use is this sort of built-in fuzzy-ish finding. I can type a little bit of a file. It's fuzzy-ish because you still have to put stars in, and it will select the two curves that have that, and it's good for finding your test file or whatever you need to find. But I definitely give this one to VS Code. I find it very natural to sit here on this file browser, even though I don't use it in Vim. I find it natural in VS Code to have a look and sort of surf through and examine my files. If I have something that's new to me or haven't worked on in a while, then I can kind of look through and get files. Of course, maybe the easiest way to open a file, or to get to the file that you need to, is just symbol-based navigation. And of course, they both have that. So, that is not working for some reason. That is the definition. That's why. So let's just go here and, I can go to the definition of my sort of sing around that way. Find references, find. Okay, so that's a definition. Let's go to finding a reference. This is, I don't remember the keyword. Okay. Shift F12. This is nice. Right? This is nice. You can open this up and zip things up, or close these little levels of indentation to find what you need to and go there. Let's see. Okay. So I'm there. Let's close this. Vim has the same thing. I must have changed something because I've got a mess everywhere. So no references. Okay. Here are my references there. There's no zipping up. That you don't have levels of indentation. So if you found something that had hundreds of references, you'd have a little bit of a mess. You can always sort of get it up here on a full screen, and you could search through them. So you do have that. You could search through dozens and dozens of references if you had a function with those references. You can also kind of just go the other way. Go to, use symbol-based navigation and hop around everywhere you need to go. Oops. I warned you. Okay. So let's just go to navigation right quick between your files. These are all the files that have been opened by Vim in this section and not explicitly closed with buffer destroy. So it can get to be a pretty big list, and you can open this up, see what the buffer numbers are, open one. There are plugins that go to the buffers in the order that you opened them. There are ways to sort of keep and groom that list. I don't really care for any of those. I prefer, if I'm working on something, you have something called the arg list, which is your tight controlled list of files that you can move into and out of. And then you have global bookmarks. So if I set a global bookmark here, then I can go someplace and come back with my bookmark. VSCode, you have these tabs up here, and you can see that even fooling around, even with the previews, I am kind of getting a lot of tabs open. But when you have them, you can split them into two panes, probably more. You can switch between them just like you would browser tabs, and they go in order of recent use. And you can, if you groom this, which is pretty easy to do because they're all open at one time, and you use the X's, then you can switch between these files. And there's been a lot of effort put into making things in Vim work the same way. This might be controversial, but I really give it to Vim on this one, because even though you have to think about where you might have to come back to, so you have to set a global bookmark, or you have to add something to the arg list. Point being, you can jump around and go all over the place. I warned you. And skip around through your file system and have all these buffers open, and go to tests and go to references and go to things in your virtual environment and have a look around and be everywhere. And then you can come back. And you don't have to worry about keeping that list right, or you don't have to worry about what you might have opened that's just going to be hanging out there cluttering your space. So it does require a little foresight, but I do prefer the Vim way of moving around. And just to show, you can add, I don't even know if you can read that. I've got the font blown up, but you can add the currently open file or any other file or all the files in a certain folder to this arg list, and then you can navigate to the arg list anytime you want. Wherever you go, you can get back someplace on that list. You can flip through that way, and you can map the forward and next to get to the files. They'll always be in the same order, the arg list, so they don't go by recency, which is another thing I prefer. You can get back to the last file by hitting Control 6 and flip back between two files. There are a lot of methods you can use, but it looks very different than doing that in VS Code. IntelliSense and LSPs, really similar. This, I think, is using is it PyTorch? It's the proprietary Microsoft version of Pywrite. So I'm using Pywrite in Vim and PyTorch in VS Code. They're very similar. In fact, I think the Pywrite configuration I have in my PyProject TOML file is actually also configuring PyTorch. It seems to behave that way, even though I haven't tested it. PyTorch has some of these libraries, this is my understanding, like typing XML or types XML that you have to install in your environment if you want to type those things when you're using Pywrite. You install them as a dev dependency in. If you're using PyTorch, the proprietary, I think they have them. Let's make some errors. Okay, you can see the errors here. Underlined, you can move between them. You can hit, wrong button, F8, and you'll move down and you'll find, there are my various errors, and you can cycle through them. You get this window that comes down underneath it. If you close that and you go to an error just with your cursor, then you're not going to get the error message unless you mouse over it. There's probably a plugin for that. Let's go back to the same file here, and where are my errors? There they are. So different keystroke, but you still go through the same motions. You go around through your errors to fix things, and the error message, if you can see my mouse pointer moving, is here on the bottom of the screen. So you can see that without having to use your mouse. One thing about VS Code that you just have to get used to is that even though there are a lot of keyboard shortcuts and you can assign a keyboard shortcut to any command, you are going to end up in the position of one hand on keyboard, one hand on mouse, or if you're really like a keyboard-centric VS Code user, one hand on keyboard, one hand on nav cluster. If you have a programmable keyboard, you can do something maybe to alleviate that and keep you on the home row a little bit more. I do have the mechanicals, but I like to keep mine stock-ish, so I'm always comfortable working on my laptop. Oh, so not a lot of difference. Not a lot of difference there. I will have to call this one a tie. You can rename. We'll get into refactoring a little bit. You can rename functions in both. I don't think in either one in Python you can extract methods. You can, in VS Code, there are a couple of other things. You can rename files and have the text updated. You can move a function between modules and have it updated. I believe it's some of the same problems. Even PyCharm has this problem. It may not update the imports in your text files. It might miss things, but VS Code does have a little more of that. For instance, if I want to move a function or functions to another module in Vim, just to show how I would do that, let's make a new module. I come over here and let's just grab something, copy it over. Now I'm going to get all these, errors because of all the things I don't have imported, and you would have a look at where those are. Let's uncomment this. We'll just even just copy the whole block over here, right? Whatever ones I don't need will light up. Delete those like that, and then you have references, and for your references you would use this piece here that I used a while ago. Come on. What do we call it? Binome. And then every place that I'm going to, that I use the word binome, I can sort of find it in here, right? There's not a whole lot. Or we'll look for import binome, see if we can find it, right? Now if you have one of these statements that are import parentheses and then lines on other lines, that might not work, but you find them and you change them in here, and then you save it and you're good. Personally, for me, if I need to do this really kind of aggressive refactoring, the Vim way is great if I know what I want to do, but if I want to play around with a project and really tear it up and really try some different structures, I do have a PyCharm subscription. I might open PyCharm and do that. And PyCharm can do a lot of refactoring that VS Code can't anyway. So there's that, right? VS Code has a little more refactoring capability than Vim. All right, discoverability. So this is a word I hear a lot in VS Code. You've got this nice Control-Shift-P, brings up all of these commands. These are the commands that you have by default. These are commands that you've installed with plugins. See, it's got, no, it does not have fuzzy matching. No, okay. No rejects here, but okay. You do have all of your commands, and you can find things. You can search, yeah, you can search in the middle of a word. No, okay, we do have fuzzy matching, so there you go. You can fuzzy match commands. No, it's all right. Yeah, it's fuzzy. Too fuzzy. I mean, look at some of these matches. But so you've got that in Vim. You know, again, I'm getting myself in trouble with the Vim crowd because you can also fuzzy match commands with the FCF plugin. You can fuzzy match your search. I don't have that installed, but you know, you can, if you know the beginning of a command or part of a command, then you can start typing the command and you can see this is the git plugin, and here are all the keywords for that. Or if you have a command, here's git gutter, you know, you can start sort of spelling out the command anyway this way. Both are fine. I think the bigger problem with either platform is knowing about commands or knowing about plugins or extensions that you don't have. So you know, you'll never know that maybe everyone doing Python, it's kind of standard to have a specific piece of functionality installed. In Vim, it's pretty standard to have FCF installed, and you won't know about that unless you hear about it somewhere. VS Code definitely does better in that respect because you've got a browser for plugins. So you can just sort of look, and then you know, each one of these is rated somewhere. Yeah. So if I mouse over, you can see that they're rated. I think there's a way to preview color schemes without even installing them, and you know, you can see a lot of different things. It's just nice. So VS Code is going to be better as far as discoverability goes. I'm not going to get too deep into this, but you know, VS Code also has debugging. Vim doesn't have debugging, so you know, if you're in VS Code, you can set breakpoints and you can step through them with F5. I'm not even going to try to do that right now because we've been tearing this code up, and I know there's just a big mess and it probably won't even run. If I have something that won't run in Vim, or I have a bug that I can't isolate, you know, I start cutting my functions up smaller and writing little tests using the Python breakpoint command. Print statements. There are plugins that allow you to interface with some more sophisticated Python things, Python debuggers, and you know, I used PyCharm for 2 years and I got used to having that debugger, but since I've went back to Vim, it's not that I don't miss it, it's just I never have missed it enough to really take the impetus to go forward and install it or set it up. When I use VS Code, I use it. If I go to Vim, I don't use it. And I think with the kind of programming that I do, or maybe just with Python in general, then it's not as critical as it might be doing something else. I don't know. Let's try to fix some of these problems. Okay, there's not much. So this is the only changed file I have. This is this little Git wrapper. Pretty cool. It was cooler. It came with a preview of Git Lens where I could click and see these nice charts of all of my Git history. It was pretty cool. It wasn't cool enough that when the trial ran out, I thought to sign up for the subscription, but it was cool enough. Now, here in VS Code, I can click this and look at changes, and I've got these arrows. So if I have something, you know, see I comment at these 2 lines here, I can just use these arrows and bring it back. I can go through changes one at a time and take them back in. I can let's make some more changes so I have something else to look at. Just break that there. And now, okay, so I can revert everything with this discard changes. So pretty cool. In Vim, to do that, I'll do the same thing with this file. I'll just comment something out, and let's see, do the same thing here. You know, I'm looking at both versions of the file. I'm looking at the whole version. It just zips up, and there are some Vim commands, diffget and diffput, that I can use to scoot things back and forth between the version on Git and the local version. Do files that way, you know, and if something gets too complex, you know, I can always go back. I've got the full editor here, so you know I can just copy a few lines and take them back over here and do something, and good there too, right? So if I want to restore a file totally, you know, if I just trash this file, and I think I've already done this a couple times as we've been talking, gread, and that'll just reset the whole file basically back to what's on Git. You know, another tool we use in Vim a lot is lazy git. Well, I don't have any changes. This won't do me any good. Let's make some changes. If I go to lazy git, make sure those are saved. Then I've got a little bit more of that browser, you know, I can go through and preview changes, and I can go in here and look around, but I can't make changes. So I can't even copy out of it. So it's nice, it's useful, but it's I had to give this one to VS Code just by a nose for the Git wrapper. My only hesitation is that I feel like that wrapper is a little thicker than the wrapper in Vim. In Vim, I'm using the Fugitive plugin by TPope, and that there could be sort of ways to mess myself up. There are piles of commands that you can get out, and use and push. Once I make a commit, for whatever reason, it asks me if I want to publish on GitHub, which is just push. I think maybe if you didn't have a GitHub repo set up already, that publish would set up the repo for you. I don't know, but I already know the other way. So when I see things that I don't entirely understand what it's going to do, I'm hesitant to click it, or I don't even know if it might be broken, or it might have a bug, and the clicking it might cause me some kind of problem that would take me research to figure out how to fix. In fact, to be honest, right, if you let's see, it's just as easy with all of this. You could to type git checkout head space dash space dash dash source. That will do the exact same thing as any of these commands. So your mileage may vary. I think I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna say that I've got to give it to VS Code because you can't compare a plugin to nothing. I think that I prefer using nothing, but it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. And so the fact that you do have a wrapper that's got the capabilities of using the arrow keys to look back at and scoot back and forth across the different sides just seems like a nice way to work. And there are always the keyboard diehards that wouldn't want to do that, but I think that's a nice way to work. I think that looks good, and might make it easy. Let's see, can you undo that? Yeah, it's seamless with the undo. That just feels like a good way to work for me. Slightly better. Macros. Well, this is where Vim is going to take it. See, even if you have a wrapper, or even if you have, an extension in VS Code that allows Vim movements, and even if you had something that allowed macros, you can do a lot more in Vim than maybe a novice would realize, or maybe even someone who's never used Vim, who's only used the modal editing, wouldn't realize. So say I set up a macro, and I want my macro to, we'll start off, go to any function definition, and skip to the function name and take off the first letter. Then go to the arguments and delete them. Delete something, right? We're making a mess. I warned you. So this is what I want my macro to do. Now that I've got that macro, not only can I rerun it, it's pasted in my register, so I can map the macro to a key. Here I'll use F10, and now I've mapped it to F10. I can paste that into my vimrc file and make it persistent. I can put it in a project vimrc file and have project-based macros, or I can use it for 15 minutes and then just get rid of it. Also, while I'm pasting it in here, I might want to make a correction on it. So now that the macro is in plain text, I can come forward and make corrections on it. Let's say I want to set. Let's do another one. I want to run PyTest with the SS argument, which will rerun all my tests. It'll run the failed test first. So I want a hotkey to do that while I'm messing with it. Maybe there's a particular test or particular way I want something to run, or a file that I want to run. Maybe what you would call a run configuration in VS Code. I can set that up with some command line argument, and then it's on a hotkey and it's right there. So you got macros and hotkeys and commands, and it's all very quick to ad hoc set up. In Vim, it's not just about building more functions, expanding until you had this configuration file that is thousands of lines long. There's a lot of ad hoc configurations. There's a lot of, let me sit down and what macro would be useful to me for the next half hour, and then you set it up in under a minute, and then you have it. And then if you want to keep it later, you put it in your vimrc file. You just have these things. You want to reach up and punch a button and have a particular thing happen, or variations on a thing, or some slightly different thing that happened last time. Then you just set it up. I mean, here's one that I use to run my tests all the time. Push a button. Here's, well, let me come back to that. So in VS Code, you do have extensions that allow macros, but you've got to program the macro inside. I mean, it's just as far as I know. You've got to program that with JavaScript or TypeScript, neither of which I know. So you can, it's almost like the way that you would extend Vim by writing something in Vim script. So you can write extensions, but as far as I can tell, the sort of ad hoc changes and setting things up temporarily besides mapping keystrokes to existing commands is not going to be possible for you. Even if you do know TypeScript or JavaScript, the way that you set up macros requires knowing, all of the API calls for VS Code. So you've got to also additionally be familiar with the VS Code API. And same in Vim, but there's a lot you can do in Vim without having to write functions. I'm quite sure there are functions you can download and find and tweak, and resources, and you can go on to Reddit and find a lot of things. It's just a little easier in Vim, so I'm going to give that one to Vim for sure. Getting into testing, and this is kind of where I end up with a problem. When you have VS Code or PyCharm, there's two pieces to it. There's whatever program they're calling, and then there's this wrapper that they built over it. And the wrapper that they've built on top of whatever you're calling has its own opportunity for bugs. So in this case, PyTest, PyTest has an opportunity for bugs that come from Python, and then you have this other opportunity for bugs in whatever the wrapper is. Or you have a situation like this where the wrapper doesn't cover all the functionality. And I use this project in this comparison for a reason. If I look in here, you have all of these tests that have red circles by them. If I try to run them, I get this mess in here because I used features of PyTest that are not supported. So it can't run my tests. The tests are good tests. If I go to the terminal and I type PyTest, then the tests run. So the wrapper is broken for me. Here, let me fail a test. Just while we're looking at tests, I will fail a test. And just so we can see what that looks like. Oh, I'm failing lots of tests. Okay. Function was popular. And wow. Okay. While we're waiting, let's just do that in Vim 2. Still not done. Long story short here, the purpose of this exercise, we're going to get to the end of it, and you're going to have all of your test results displayed in a window. In VS Code, each will be a link that you'll be able to click, and you'll be able to go to wherever the test failed. If you ran into an exception somewhere, it's not in your test file, it's just in the files itself, it'll take you right to the exception. In Vim, you're going to get a line number. You can set that up differently. You can you can use the Vim make command and create something that will give you a link. But you've got to set it up. Just naturally, when you run something, you don't see it. Let's look at here. I'm just going to run my pre-commit linters, which should pick up on the same problem, the same error that this test is hitting. And I have set that up with Make, so it will give me links. So just you can set it up, but with the tests, I just haven't done it. It's a little, well, it's just a speed bump to set up different compilers for different files. So here you go. Here are your results in VS Code. And I'm not going to try to chase one of those down, but those are all links to places in your file. Looks like I made a few more errors than I wanted to. And here are your results in Vim. And this found nothing. Okay, we're going to make it give it an error that it will find. Ooh, okay. Oh no, we still got rough coming. There we go. So here, I get one little error. I can navigate that with the mouse or the keyboard or whatever I like. So, you know, if you set it up, it works. Now, this is a little unfair because I'm comparing the VS Code extension to nothing. So in Vim, I'm not using any PyTest extension at all. In VS Code, I don't have to use a PyTest extension at all. I can just reach back and forth and type PyTest, or I could set up a command to just enter PyTest in and have a hot code and run it in my terminal, and everything would work fine. It's really easy to even hide this, so I wouldn't even have to look at it for this project. Just fix it. Wow, what a mess. Okay. Even here, scroll page up. No, see, I cannot use any keyboard controls to go through these results. Mouse only. If I hit anything on the keyboard, what is this? Okay. If I hit anything on the keyboard, it just goes down to enter another command. This looks a little better in Vim. I can use my keyboard commands to, let's go way up to the top of this, right? Find where we're at. Go straight to the beginning. So yes, I don't have to use the plugin for VS Code on PyTest, and why would you? Because it's a mess. At least when you're using PyTest in the manner I'm using it right now. Had I coded my entire project in VS Code, then I never would have thought to use those features. I would have just accepted that they're not accessible to me, and I never would have coded it this way. And I'm sure there are things I've done in Vim that. Or things I've avoided in Vim maybe that I would have done in VS Code because it would have been easier and more accessible to me. But is what it is. Ultimately, I went back to Vim because going back and forth and running things in the terminal or the integrated terminal is pretty much just the Vim workflow. It's faster and better, and I've already got all the extensions, as you will, all the code in my vimrc to run tests and run files in one keystroke to back in and back out of things, and to interrupt and retest and refactor, and if I find something that isn't working, or if I find a test that I want to sit here and pound on and make changes, or I want to tear up some function into several small functions, or I want to move things across modules, then the continuous verification that all of my tests run and that everything is going fine, that I can run something over and over and again, is a lot faster. That in addition to the editing capabilities. So one more comparison and this will be another win for VS Code here. If I open up my, let's see, my Markdown README file, and it's because Vim is a terminal program. That's got advantages and disadvantages, but one of the disadvantages is, you can't do something like this. Here I'm opening up the preview, and I can preview my file as I edit it, and it'll sort of scroll. And Vim, we're not totally sunk. You can, let's get this off of full screen. You can, come on now. Preview a Markdown file in a browser. Set that up. You can see this is, it's taking a minute, right? Let's get it nice and neat. And it will also scroll with your edits. You can edit your Markdown file and see. It's pretty nice, but you see I'm not getting my example pictures right here. In VS Code, the pictures are displayed. Going to the browser will display pictures, but it doesn't understand this GitHub picture reference, this source set kind of language. See, I've got one picture for when the user has a dark scheme, one picture when the user has a light scheme. Something in there just breaks it, and it doesn't get it. So it's a little sloppier, but you can do that in Vim. And well, I think that's all I'm going to do, at least for now. One more. Snippets. I don't use little snippets because I think GitHub kind of takes away the need for them. I think you're worse off with using little function snippets and test snippets as before. But I use snippets for big configuration files. Like if I want to fill in a pre-commit config file. Let's see. Snippets for that are going to be in here in my YAML. This is the system that VS Code uses, and I'm sure it's got a lot of power because it seems more complex than it needs to be. So I imagine there's a reason for that, and there's some really great things you can do with it. In Vim, we have ulti-snips, and if you just look at what an ulti-snips edit looks like, it's just plain text. Right? So if I build a big config file or some sort of CI script, and I want to keep it as a snippet, just paste it into here. The dollar signs, that's not searching for literal dollar signs. The dollar signs you can add in. That works the same way, and just a small one, but something to end it with a little victory for Vim. I'm sure this was long, and I hope it was useful if you're familiar with one and not the other, or if the last time you used Vim was 5 or 10 years ago and before LSPs, and kind of under the impression that you didn't have, that you were in the Stone Age, or that all the magic of modern editors hadn't been sort of passed down. That stuff at this point is most of it accessible to any application that wants to go out and run it as a system. And you have LSPs and refactoring and symbol-based navigation without C tags, and a lot of the things that you would have in VS Code in Vim, plus, my opinion, a little bit more polish. If I were in a different using a different programming language or doing different tasks, I'd definitely be willing to revisit VS Code and see if it doesn't make my life easier using it that way. Maybe try the Vim extension for it. I don't think that you're missing anything with either one of them, at least in this little narrow field of what I do. And whatever you're using, I hope you enjoy using it.